How would somebody who's suffering from a mental nervous condition, which basically doesn't have an objective evidence, which means there's no X-ray, MRI, or diagnostic blood work or anything that's going to say, yes, you have anxiety or
Right.
PTSD, right?
Right.
So how does Prudential evaluate a claim just upon some other doctor reviewing the medical records without physically being in the presence of this person and make the determination that, yes, we think for the last 18 or 24 months you were not able to return to work, but now we think you're better? Hi, I'm attorney Greg Dell, joined by attorney Rachel Alters. And Rachel, we have this opportunity to talk about one of your recently resolved long-term disability cases against Prudential. It was a fantastic victory that you're going to tell us about on a mental nervous type claim that you were able to transition out of the 24-month limitation period that's common in most Prudential group disability policies. So let's get right into why this person was denied and what you were able to do to get their benefits reinstated.
Sure. So I represent a software engineer who had a wonderful career. However, he started suffering severe anxiety. He had PTSD, panic attacks, severe depression. So he went out of work for those reasons initially. Prudential did approve him, and they paid his claim for approximately 18 months, and then they denied him. They decided that he all of a sudden improved. He was better. He could go back to work, but that wasn't the case at all. So he called me in a panic, very upset, saying, "There's no way I can work. I'm ill. Not only am I depressed, do I have anxiety, PTSD, etc., but I'm having issues with my memory, my executive functioning. I can't find things around the house. I can't function on a daily basis. My doctors are looking into this, and there's no way I could do my job. So please help me. I don't know why I was cut off." So that's what we did. We handled an appeal for him, and we were able to get him back on claim.
And how long did they pay him for?
They paid him for about 18 months. The policy had a 24-month mental nervous limitation. They cut him off before that was over. They just, for some reason, looked at his medical records. They had their doctors do a peer review and decided that he didn't seem as bad and that he miraculously had recovered and should be doing his job again, when actually his health had been going downhill in other aspects too, but they were ignoring the cognitive aspects of his health, which they had that information, but they were focusing solely on the mental health issues alone, and they just decided they were going to cut him off, which they do all the time.
How would somebody who's suffering from a mental nervous condition, which basically doesn't have an objective evidence, which means there's no X-ray, MRI, or diagnostic blood work or anything that's going to say, yes, you have anxiety or
Right.
PTSD, right?
Right.
So how does Prudential evaluate a claim just upon some other doctor reviewing the medical records without physically being in the presence of this person and make the determination that, yes, we think for the last 18 or 24 months you were not able to return to work, but now we think you're better?
Right. Well, you would think that the right thing to do would be to have them examined by a doctor who was qualified to assess somebody in person as to whether, they are depressed, they have anxiety, they have, PTSD. If this stuff is still going on, to not only just review their medical records, but to have them examined. They didn't do this. They just chose to do a paper review, and we've discussed this before. A lot of times therapists and psychiatrists, they don't take wonderful notes.
Right.
They're focusing on treating the patient and the relationship with the patient, and the notes are often very brief. And sometimes the full picture is not in the notes. So a lot of times it is obviously much better to have the claimant assessed, to have them examined, to have, the one-on-one, and maybe even just speaking with their doctors, which they did not do, would have been, a big eye-opener, because his treating psychiatrist and psychologist would have said, absolutely no way this man could handle a full-time occupation, especially in the field he was performing or in any gainful occupation full-time.
Well, I just think before you even got into starting your appeal, it's disturbing the manner in which they deny someone specifically with a mental nervous type condition. Think of, just based upon a paper review, think about it in a way where Prudential goes ahead and hires their employees, right? And they ask people to submit resumes. Do they hire without ever speaking or seeing the potential person?
I would hope not.
No. And what employer does hire somebody just based upon a paper resume without even picking up the phone call or coming in for an interview? why do they do that? And I'm making this analogy because there's one thing on paper, there's another thing to the human dynamic, because you can sit with someone and within 5 seconds you get a feeling for, is this person for real or are they not? Is this person having issues or are they not? So for Prudential to just look at it on paper, to me it's manipulative, because you can take whatever interpretation you want out of a piece of paper. But it's a lot better in a sense to say, let me sit down as a medical professional, if they were to hire one, which they don't want to spend the money and do that.
Right.
Who's going to sit down with our client and realize, hey, this person had a very high level job, very challenging job, very high paying job, and they clearly would not be able to handle
Right.
the responsibility. So anyhow, that didn't happen.
Nope.
It never happens I shouldn't say never, almost never happens where on a denial they're going to examine someone for a mental nervous condition. But
Yeah.
what did you do in order to get benefits reinstated?
Well, what we did, I got a history from him to figure out, hey, what is it that's keeping you from being able to handle working on a full-time basis or in any job? And he would say, I can't get out of bed. I have a lot of anxiety. I don't leave the house often. And then he was talking about all the memory issues he's having, and he's been seeing a neurologist who was saying, they were very concerned that he might have early signs of dementia, possibly Alzheimer's. So they sent him for a neuropsychological evaluation, which he didn't pass because the validity testing, he didn't answer a lot of questions, so the validity testing was off, so it wasn't a useful test. He had another one done in 2024. And that one was more useful, but it showed basically that he was very depressed, had a lot of anxiety, but the memory issues, the executive functioning, all of it was off. And they were very concerned about this because they had said, they didn't know why medically this would be happening to him. So they sent him for a CT scan of his brain and a PET scan. He had a bunch of actual objective tests and came up and they showed an infarct in his brain, which, means he possibly had had a stroke previously. And he was diagnosed with onset early dementia. So unfortunately for him, he does have a physical issue preventing him from being able to work on top of the psychological depression, anxiety, PTSD stuff that he had that initially took him out of work. We were able to work with his doctors to write up letters and reports that showed that not only does he have this depression, anxiety issue, which would have only gotten him paid for 24 months had they continued paying him the additional 6 months, we were able to prove that not only does he have a mental health condition, but that he has a physical, objectively proven physical issue that cognitively affects his ability to think. And he's a software engineer. And, he's on computers all day and he can't, if he has memory issues and executive functioning issues, that's just not going to ever happen for him. So we were able to prove this through an appeal process and the additional testing that his doctors put him through. And then Prudential did the right thing and they put him back on claim.
Well, that was a fantastic victory, and the fact that you were able to help him get that objective evidence not only helped him to win his claim, but he may not have found out about these particular physical diagnoses that he had as well, and now the doctors can help treat him for that and slow down the progression of this disease and diagnosis that he has. So, definitely you will continue to protect his benefits because Prudential's still going to look at that. That's a slowly deteriorating condition, but we've seen Prudential with these diagnoses go, oh, you're better now, you can go do another job or you can work part-time or something like that. So as a tip, this particular claimant has to continue to treat with the doctor regularly, continue to take any prescribed medications, continue to provide very good documentation to the doctor. And importantly, every time that your client goes to the doctor, ask for copies of the medical records, review them, send them to you as his lawyer, and make sure that they're showing all of the complaints. So,
absolutely.
If you're someone out there who has a Prudential disability denial or needs help with any aspect of your Prudential claim, feel free to reach out to Rachel or myself. No matter where you live in the country, we're available to assist you, and we'll always provide you with an initial free phone consultation.